Good afternoon, everybody. I'm back from holiday now. Really glad to be back as well, by the way. And if you believe that, you believe anything. Back from sunny Spain, and it was sunny too. 24 degrees at 10 o'clock at night. I'm heartbroken, really, but there you are. Now, the first thing I've got to say is this: that it looks like the university college union, university and colleges, can't even remember what the union's called now, but UCU anyway. It looks like they're going to be calling a university-wide strike on the 31st, which is this Thursday. So if that's the case, then all those of you who are face-to-face may well have to spend the time at home listening to me and Chris Nicholson online. Sorry about that. This is, nobody likes doing this sort of thing, but yeah, I'm not gonna. Well, anyway, that's the situation. I'll keep you posted by email. Okay, so the main bulk of the materials that have come through this week are from Delphine and from Rachel and from Shirley. Delphine is the most up to date with lesson 7 already in. And she said, I asked you this. I asked this question. I asked you a question in lesson 7 about, given the fact that cognitive impairment in patients with heart failure is such a widely and commonly reported thing, does this have any implications for the education that people get offered? If you've got somebody who comes in who's having trouble remembering dates and times and has got fuzzy mind, for whatever reason it is that people get cognitive dysfunction and heart failure. What does that do to their ability to take in information that you're supposed to be giving them? And you're supposed to be giving them an awful lot of information, aren't you? Because the treatment for heart failure is drugs and lifestyle alteration, isn't it? That's what it is. Drugs and lifestyle alteration. Don't eat salt. Don't drink too much water. Do take exercise. And then there's the drugs as well. Now, that's a fairly complicated regime to remember if you think about it. And so, if they can't really remember, then does this mean that they aren't going to be, you're going to be getting non-compliance because the person just can't remember what's been told to them, Now, Delphine has replied to that by saying, look, it's really important that people are given education and are told the importance of all these matters. But in a sense, that misses the point, because if they genuinely like to, but they can't, then, how is all that going to work? Delphine, again, takes a very liberal, considering that you're in the Middle East, Delphine, you take a very liberal attitude to sexual advice, for instance. I wonder what your sexual advice would be for people who weren't married, for instance. I wonder if you would regard it as being just as normal a part of human life for people who weren't married. Certainly, I don't know what the situation is in Saudi Arabia, but my guess is that if you started giving sex advice to people who weren't married in Saudi Arabia, that might get you in an awful lot of trouble. And we aren't even going to mention, what you do about people who are of the same sex. What sexual advice you would give to people in those circumstances. Certainly not in the Middle East, and of all the Middle East, certainly not Saudi Arabia. And then I asked about the lifestyle. Is it difficult to enforce lifestyle events? Salt restriction, for instance, and water restriction. And there's Delphine saying that she's often met patients who hide water under the bedclothes. Now, what I want to say to you is this: you've got to be awful confident that the restriction of fluids is worthwhile in those circumstances, because thirst is a terrible thing to carry, isn't it? And if a person feels as though they're short of water, then that's a very uncomfortable position to be in. but I wonder how strong the evidence is. Already we've seen, and I'll put it up again. I don't care. We'll put it up again. The paper about the salt restriction, for instance, which points to some very hard to explain conclusions. And I wonder if the same doesn't go for water restriction too. Is this one of those things which we accept as a fact for which there is not no evidence, but not an enormous amount of evidence? I'll leave that with you. I'm not grinding an axe here. I'm just raising questions. Rachel, I asked you in lesson 6's lessons what investigations might be offered to a person to distinguish breathlessness of a pulmonary cause and breathlessness of a heart failure cause. And you've wrote X-ray, which I suppose is correct, really, isn't it? If you can't see the sorts of characteristic signs and symptoms, the fluffiness that doctors talk about on the X-ray, then pretty much you can rule out. But the one I was going for was brain natriuretic peptide. If the person is breathless and the BNP is normal, then it's a pretty good indicator that this is a non-cardiac cause, really. But Rachel, nice, precise and economical answers to the questions that I asked. Yes, very good. Both Shirley and Rachel answered questions from a previous week about urea and creatinine. And really what I was asking these questions for was for you to draw a distinction between two types of protein metabolism. Urea, as you rightly point out, is a protein metabolic byproduct, but the protein is in your diet, whereas creatinine is, again, protein metabolism byproduct, but the protein in question is your own muscles. And the first thing that anyone gets told in renal failure is eat less protein, and the reason for that is that that'll control the level of uremia. But where doctors want to track how well your kidneys are doing, then they'll stop looking at urea so much, because the amount of urea in your bloodstream will depend on what you last had for your dinner. What they'll become far more interested in is creatinine, because the rate at which you turn over and burn up muscles will be kind of more constant and won't be dependent on what it is that you've had for your lunch. So I was interested in you drawing a distinction between those two types of muscle breakdown. I'm getting one or two expressions of interest in essays. Yes, they are all good. They are all good. Don't pick too general a subject. That's what I'd say to you at this stage. Be a bit specific, Don't just say, smoking and heart failure would be a good one, actually. But try and make it a bit more precise. Try and don't do too general. I don't know. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say. It's 3 o'clock now. That's all I'm going to say for this week. If anyone needs to be in touch with me, you know where I am. Otherwise, keep pumping.